Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Abdullah, can you hear me? Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Yes, you can hear you loud and clear.
Alhamdulillah. How you guys doing?
Alhamdulillah, good. How are you? How are you doing?
Alhamdulillah. Khair.
It's a pleasure having you on.
How goes California?
Sorry?
How goes California?
How goes California?
How's California?
So,
Alhamdulillah, it's good. We have good weather here. Good weather. That's about it.
It seemed like you had to check where you were before, like, look at Google Maps and like, where are we based again? Sorry, yeah, that's the place, California. Sorry, not to be confused with Khilafah or something. I don't know where else were you thinking?
So yeah, I mean, let's dive straight into it. I don't think we need an introduction. The topic of this segment is our political identity. So where we line them up exactly, left or right, conservative or liberal, Lib Dems or whatever you guys have. Anyway, Abdullah, you can take it away.
Sorry, you don't think there's an introduction? Sorry, were you going to make an introduction, or do you want me to wait for that? I didn't hear you. Sorry.
Sorry. Oh, yeah,
sorry.
Yes. Sorry, I missed that. So just give me 1 second. Yeah. Okay, so just a quick introduction to Abdullah. Abdullah Andalusi is an international speaker, thinker, and intellectual activist for Islam and Muslim affairs. His work involves explaining and demonstrating by rational argument intellectual proofs for Islamic belief systems and promoting the Islamic way of life and Islamic solution for contemporary problems. On a personal note, Abdullah takes Islamic opinions from classical Sunni schools of thought and Sunnah wal Jama'ah. Abdullah is of Portuguese and French colonial North African descent. I'd like to hear more about that. And was formerly a Christian until he embraced Islam at 14, after a period of study that started when he was 10 years old. He has continued to study Islam in depth ever since. Abdullah has had a long experience of working in the Muslim community, and his activities involve researching, writing, and talking extensively on Islamic revivalism, or Nahda, theology, philosophy, and physical sciences, sociology, psychology, anthropology, and political philosophy. Abdullah has delivered talks internationally on the question of the purpose of life, the existence of God, miracle of the Quran, the superiority of the Sharia as a social and political system, and Islamic economics. Furthermore, Abdullah has given extensive talks and written articles rationally critiquing secularism, liberalism, secular democracy, and materialism, so atheism and secular humanism. He has spoken in community centers, universities, colleges, and TV channels. You might have seen him on TV, BBC Big Question, or that sort. He's also the founder of Muslim Debate Initiative, MDI. So that promotes open dialogue and critical debate between thinkers, academics, politicians, and public speakers of all backgrounds. Without further ado, let's take it to you, Sean.
First time, huh? All right, Bismillah. Anyway, I can share my screen. I'm not used to this particular program.
So you can share it and I'll
Okay, khair, inshallah. Okay, well, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah, rabbil alameen, as-salatu was-salam ala Nabi Kareem Muhammad wa ali tayyibin wa sahbihi salihin. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to everyone that's in attendance. can't really see. I can't really see who's how many people are attending or who's attending. So I'm assuming there are people that are attending.
And then also the number you see on the screen isn't really accurate because it's meant to be 0 really. It's just we have our attendance on a separate website. We're not using YouTube or Facebook.
All right, khair, inshallah. Well, that's fine. Okay, so yeah, I'd like to thank the Annur Masjid for obviously setting up this event, and inshallah we're going to discuss some topics about, you know, the right wing, left wing, conservative, liberal, a number of these kind of questions. Does Islam come on any particular spectrum, and should Muslims embrace any particular labels? Sorry, I think your mic is on. It's kind of screeching a bit loud as feedback on your side.
Yeah.
Just mute it, please.
Which one's on?
Okay, we're
This
good.
one's on. Yes, which one?
What?
Just give us a second.
Abdullah, how continue? How long you be?
Which mic's on? Okay, start.
You can go ahead. I think we'll just put ourselves on mute until we have something to say, inshallah.
Okay, khair, inshallah.
So you can go ahead, inshallah.
Oh, sorry, I was waiting for you to put. You said you're going to put you on mute before I begin. Is that, should I wait?
Well, do you still hear me or no?
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. All right, khair, inshallah. Nice start. Just because it was creating feedback, unfortunately. Okay, so let me share my screen then, see if that works on this. Okay, let me see. Hopefully this. Okay, Bismillah. Right, can you see this? Yep, yes. Okay, you can. Alhamdulillah. Okay, let's begin. So, I think before we can really discuss anything regarding understanding left wing, right wing, I think what many Muslims need to understand is a little bit of history and background. So, the West has this time in its history called the Enlightenment, not to be confused with the Renaissance. The Renaissance was its technological and revival, and its learning revival. The Enlightenment was a byproduct, an unintentional byproduct of the Renaissance, where they discovered, or rather they invented or concocted, a materialistic political basis or materialistic political and ethical philosophy to ground their morals and their laws other than biblical ideas and Roman and Germanic legacy laws. So what we see is that there's two main prongs, and this will be used very kind of important to the Enlightenment. You obviously had Thomas Hobbes influencing John Locke and John Stuart Mill, who are the liberals. Then you have continental liberalism, which influenced from René Descartes' kind of ideas, influenced Jacques Rousseau and François Paulin de la Barre, which would later go on to socialism, Marxist socialism, neo-Marxism, post-Marxism. So we'll get to all that. But first, we're going to go for a bit of a history. So everyone knows John Locke, as you guys being in the United States of America. Do check, make sure that you are in the United States of America as well, not just California. You seem to be a bit kind of startled there when I mentioned you were in California. Like, what? He knows we're here? Anyway, so everyone knows that John Locke tried to make an argument. His first argument in the Enlightenment was to argue for religious liberalism or religious freedom, freedom of idea, freedom to preach your particular beliefs, and in essence making religion secular. So religion no longer should be connected to politics. And he said that magistrates or government should not be in charge of saving men's souls. Previously, the Christians understood that the government should be in charge of saving men's souls, and that includes Christian Aqidah. And of course, because Christians don't agree on Aqidah, there was lots of wars and heretic burning and so on and so forth to make everyone on the same aqidah of the interpretation of the state. But that obviously led to a lot of fighting between Protestants, not just between Catholics and Protestants. And then liberalism was kind of concocted as a solution to say, look, why don't we base it on a materialistic basis? Because Christianity doesn't really go into politics so much. There's reasons for that. And so liberalism kind of came out of that kind of conflagration. And it started with the main creed, the core aqidah of the Enlightenment, which every Enlightenment school of thought, every right-wing, left-wing generally agree on and believe in. Their interpretation differs. They have ikhtilaf, right? They have difference of opinion, and the ikhtilaf can be violent. Just like their ancestors who were burning heretics, they obviously now, they don't burn heretics anymore, but they bomb, kill, arrest heretics, or sorry, they use the modern term, extremists. Anyone who's different from them, they call you're into extremes, you're not like us. And unfortunately, many Muslims use this term extremism, even though we don't have a term for extremism other than people who go outside of the correct aqidah. So instead of believing in one God and Jesus is a prophet of God, it was described that Christians did ghulu. They kind of went outside the bounds. They were excessive in their faith because they loved Jesus so much that they didn't want Jesus just to be just a man. He had to be more than a man, so they did ghulu. But you don't refer to any people who commit violence as doing ghulu. They're just fasiqun, right? So they are wrongdoers. But we don't have the term extremism being referred to Muslims within Islamic school, within Islamic worldview. Instead, Islam views extremists as those who go to excess and then outside of the bounds of their religion. So they either do something too much, and then it becomes oppressive, or they do something. For example, someone wants to fast all day, all night, and not break their fast. That would be ghulu, right? Even though fasting, fasting is not wrong or haram to do, but if they did it so much that they started to kind of wither away, then that would be ghulu by the definition. It's going to excess. So something that was okay in a small amount, but if you do it too much to the point that you're now causing harm against the other rights your body has on you, it's ghulu. So anyway, according to the creed of the Enlightenment kind of era, the Enlightenment philosophers, the idea that obviously John Locke came up with, and others came up with similar to him, was that human beings, now he made an assumption. He said that maybe humans, before they came into societies, they lived as individuals in the forest or somewhere, somewhere as individuals, living by themselves. So in their state of nature, humans were individuals, and they only come into society to kind of protect themselves from each other. So now that's historically wrong. Of course, humans lived in communities. They've always lived in communities, families, and then extended families, maybe 20 to 30 people as a small group surviving in the wild. That's how humans have always kind of lived up until the modern world. So his assumption is wrong, but then this assumption becomes the basis behind liberalism. And despite the fact that the West learned so many facts that refute that basis, they still hold on to that creed, and they hold on to it today as a dogma, as a unjustified, undemonstrated ideal. And that is that all humans are absolute lord of their own person and possessions, equal to the greatest and subject to nobody, all being kings as much as he and everyone is equal. Everyone is the absolute king and lord of themselves. Nothing is greater than the individual. Nothing can impinge upon the individual without their consent, of course. And then people elect governments to protect their rights, and the government is voted into power and therefore has your consent to take your possessions by tax, and has your consent to arrest you and use reasonable force against you, your body and person, lock you into a jail if you break the laws that the government implements, because you've given them consent to govern you by participating in elections. So your election is your bay'ah, is your kind of your pledge and your transference of your sovereignty to the state. And now these are the basic ideas of the Enlightenment that kind of popped out. But it wouldn't be so simple generally. Now, one of the ideas that popped out of the Enlightenment was the idea that the purpose of human beings, or rather what they kind of seek, is to be given freedom so that they can pursue life, liberty, and estate, which is in essence property. So life, liberty, and property, and it should be protected. This should be protected. So their desire to pursue life, liberty, and property. Now this got kind of changed into the U.S. Declaration of Independence because property didn't sound so romantic, so it got changed to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Of course, one could say that in the United States and in many Western countries, property and the pursuit of happiness, or the pursuit of property and the pursuit of happiness, are one and the same thing. And that was because John Locke believed that happiness was merely continual gratification of the senses. Anyway, this is the kind of basis behind what you'd call classical liberalism. John Locke then defines freedom. What do we mean by freedom? He argues that it's not freedom to do whatever you want, but freedom just means that you have laws, and where the laws do not prohibit something, you're free to do what you want within the permissible, within the mubah, right? You're free to do what you want when it's in the things which are not prohibited. So he would say that, let's say, abolishing cocaine, or making it prohibited, is not impinging on freedom, because as long as the law applies to everybody, and you're free to do something less than take cocaine, like, I don't know, drink alcohol or drink water, that's your freedom. But as long as the law applies to everyone. So that's really what the idea of freedom means, not this absolute idea of freedom. What the argument for freedom that the Enlightenment kind of thinkers were thinking about was really freedom from arbitrary government. So the government, the leader can do whatever they want to you. So let's say, Saudi Arabia, UAE, such countries around the world. Obviously, there are many more. But such countries, if the government doesn't like you, they just don't like you, right? Nothing's going to stop them from arresting you and basically doing bad things to you, because you're not under any particular protections. And then in a way, they describe this as you're the property of the king, right? The king is now owns you and owns everyone in the land and can do whatever they want with you. So arbitrary government. Whereas what the Enlightenment kind of thinkers were trying to deal with, obviously tyrannical kings in Europe, was they needed kings to be either constrained by a constitution, and then the constitution is more important than the king. So the king can't go breach the constitution. It's not one of those fake constitutions where the king can just do whatever he wants anyway. And that sounded very enticing to Enlightenment thinkers. That like we shouldn't be under arbitrary rule. And of course, in this sense, obviously Islam, we believe that the caliph is constrained by the Sharia, and the Sharia has some clear protections of the rights of Muslims. Of course, not all caliphs have been good, and of course, not all presidents of the United States of America have been good and haven't oppressed people or taken their rights away in contravention of the Constitution. But it's meant to be a protection anyway, so against arbitrary government. But the basis of the law, obviously, is where we differ with the Enlightenment thinkers, because they tried to derive it based on assumptions of the human natural law, which doesn't really exist, and then that gets replaced with utilitarianism, which is the maximum happiness for the maximum number. But how do you define happiness? How do you quantify it? What is human happiness? How do you even acquire it? How do you actually organize human nature to make and give them a particular, what they meant to be doing to make them happy in the first place? It can't answer these questions. Of course, Islam can. And that's where we significantly diverge from the Enlightenment. They tried to derive a material basis for human beings by saying, like just to make sure that they have food and excess of pleasures, drink, alcohol, and things like that. That should be give people what they think they want, and that should be sufficient, as long as it doesn't physically directly harm other people by direct physical violence. And that's the underlying principle. Of course, harm is caused indirectly, and even by people not intending to cause harm. And this is why liberalism actually failed in the 19th century, when you had massive monopolies and people starving to death on the streets and no healthcare and no one cares about the poor and the elderly and so on. So people just died of malnutrition, people died of preventable disease and things like this. And this made the West realize that we need to do a change in our idea of liberalism. So this is now called classical liberalism. It failed 19th century. They instituted new social liberalism, which is liberalism 2.0, and produced antitrust laws to break down monopolies when a company gets too big and too powerful, because they saw that it had led to exploitation of workers and and sweatshops and things like that, rights for workers and things like that, things which classical liberalism doesn't think is important. Like, as long as you consent to work in a contract for a boss, that's sufficient. You've consented to give to a contract. It doesn't matter if you're being exploited. Doesn't matter if you're not, if you are now someone who can't feed your family, or someone who is dying of a preventable and easily treatable disease. You're at least you're not being forced to do whatever you want, whatever you're doing. So you can have freedom. You're free to die, basically, and free to get sick, and free to be exploited, provided that exploitation is by your consent, even if a reasonable person would see that you wouldn't have much choice in the matter. So that's kind of a little brief history of the West. Now, in the West, there was kind of, in a way, two types of Enlightenment. There was the English one, and then there was the French one, or the continental one, German French, Jacques Rousseau and François Paul de Debat, and this will lead to two divergent schools of thought in the West. One of those schools of thought, you could say early feminism, was the idea by a follower of Descartes that because humans are minds first, and the first thing you can know about the world is that you're a mind, then all humans have minds. Minds are detached from the body and are not affected by the body so much. So everyone's minds are equal. And on that basis, he was one of the first people to argue that the mind has no sex, or has no gender in essence. Well, has no sex is probably a better word. And so men and women should be equal, because their minds are identical. Whereas the English kind of Enlightenment thinkers who argued for liberalism actually thought women were inferior. So John Locke thought women were inferior to men, and didn't think that they would deserve to get the same kind of let's say legal rights because he thought that they were inferior due to his pseudo-empirical calculations or lack thereof. So we see this in the French kind of continent, and we see there's a divergence now between kind of English liberalism or English Enlightenment thought and French or German Enlightenment thought. We see Jacques Rousseau argue in the late 18th century that private property is the origin of injustice. So the inequality of property between people is the origin of injustice. And this will now raise a question of justice and equality versus individualism, because if everyone's free and you can do what you want, and that means use your property as you see fit, and your property was inherited, maybe you might have inherited more property than the poor person on the street. But liberalism will say, we don't care about how you inherited your property. You're free to do with your property as you see fit. Whereas it was this growing kind of clamor for justice, saying, well, that's not fair, because it's the property ultimately comes from Earth, planet Earth. We all have equal ownership of the planet, or equal access to it. So how come some people have more property than others? These kind of questions were arising at that early stage, and would eventually lead to the French Revolution. We also see that Jacques Rousseau argues for the idea of a material or historical progress of mankind. He wasn't the first person, but he argued that there was a gradual progress where humans will finally get to their utopia, the ideal of a kind of reach the time where they can truly manifest their state of nature, to be free and living under justice or civil justice. And this kind of idea is again in the continental field of philosophy. What this kind of leads to is that people often think that liberalism is free, and of course you're free to express your opinions and ideas because of all this so-called talk of freedom. But as you'll discover, liberalism has its own intolerances from its own perspective. Once it starts out with an aqidah, which is everyone owns their own body. You're the owner of your own body, even though you never made yourself. Even though if you're going to judge it by, let's say, your parents making yourself, well, then you belong to your parents. You don't belong to yourself. As many ancient cultures believed you did belong to your parents. And since you didn't make yourself, how can you say you own yourself? In fact, if you're looking from a purely materialistic lens, if we're just made of subatomic particles, how can we ever say that one subatomic particle owns another subatomic particle in nature? That doesn't make any sense. There's no such thing as ownership. There's no such thing as justice or equality, because we're not all the same. We're not all exactly the same. So where does this equality come from? This is an idea that was a remnant from, again, the kind of continental school of thought. The idea that we're all individual minds, minds are not physical, but we're all somehow identical and unique in them, and we're all equal. So if all minds are equal, then for you to judge another mind's actions, which as long as it doesn't physically violate other people without their consent, then who are you to judge others, right? Who are you to make any comment about other people? And then this will lead to, in essence, a kind of intolerance of opinion. So you might think, well, I don't think that's a good idea what you're doing, or I think what you're doing is bad. You're saying it to try to explain to that person, maybe to persuade them. And this is going to be viewed as a social intolerance, that you're actually making it society intolerant for those people. And so instead of going around saying it's haram what you're doing, haram, as they say, the haram police trope that is usually sometimes used by Muslims who don't want to follow Islam so much. They don't like being told to follow it. So they call, what's this haram police going around? Liberalism has its own version of it, right? Or the Enlightenment philosophers have their own version of it, and they'll go around with they won't say haram, they don't say haram alaik. Instead, they'll say, don't judge them. It's their choice. Are you slut shaming? It's their body. So their body, their choice. So there's a bit of typo there. I'll just change that one. Their body, their choice. So in light of those things, that's the kind of stuff that's what you get. So out of the Enlightenment comes these two idols, and now I'm going to explain how everything falls into its place. There are two idols. I call them Libertas, which was a so-called Roman goddess called Libertas. Some people say that the Statue of Liberty is modeled on the Roman goddess Libertas, which stands for liberty, and Equitas, which is another Roman idol, which stands for kind of justice or potentially equality. And you have these two idols that pop out of the Enlightenment. And where you get, I should have probably reversed this round, because this is actually now, this here is actually the left and this is the right. But if you were to imagine that this is going to be, the more right-wing you are, it's going to be in this side, the more left-wing you are going to be on this side. So what happens? So there are these two idols that are now worshipped in the Enlightenment idea. One is Libertas, the idea that the individual is sovereign and should not be impinged upon by society, state, religion, anything else. And then you have Equitas, which is equality, and it argues that people who generally believe in liberty, individual liberty, will say that we're all equal, maybe under law, and that's sufficient. And a lot of people might say, well, we're not really equal. If you have more property than I do, that's not fair. You're going to have more power in a state that gives freedoms. You're going to have more power, you're going to have more influence, and you can potentially exploit people. And so they would argue for equality. And of course, equality in what? Equality in wealth, equality in cultural values. So are all cultures equal? Are all individual personal moralities equal as well? These are the kind of questions that are going to be popping up and having much debate between these two schools of thought. Sorry, not the two schools, but you could say the two wings. Now, people don't understand conservatism, and they don't understand liberalism generally, and they don't even understand fascism, and I'd argue they don't understand anything else. So when they talk about these things, Muslims often jump into any label that sounds nice, or mentions justice. So I believe this, and then they jump onto that bandwagon, not knowing what it means. So the Enlightenment idea was about protecting the liberty of the individual, and as a minimum, equality under the law. So the law treats everyone the same, at least in theory. Now, this early version of liberalism is something which the conservatives, when they saw, you could say, when there was the French Revolution occurring, and it was really radical. They wanted to abolish the aristocracy and abolish kind of wealth disparity. It was almost socialistic in a way. It frightened the rest of the Enlightenment. Many of the right Enlightenment thinkers, David Hume popped out and just kind of said, and a few others, Edmund Burke, the father of conservatism, he said, no, it's going too far, too fast. And so he kind of argued that, look, we can't just change social hierarchy. You just give people freedoms under the law, so they're not under tyrannical rulers that can do whatever they want to them, and you protect their property, and maybe eventually we'll let people out of the goodness of their own heart donate money to the poor and to make those changes themselves. But we can't force things, because if you start demolishing all hierarchies, you're going to get the kind of chaos you saw in the French Revolution. So a conservative is part of the Enlightenment, right? They are there. They want to conserve the social institutions that guarantee the Enlightenment's understanding of freedom and liberty and equality, not conserve a religion. Now, many people will see that religious people, or in America, like many Christians, will be conservative, but they are mostly social conservatives, which is that they don't want society to basically get rid of encouraging traditional family values mandated by the Bible, some aspects of morality, like obviously no abortions, and they will repackage the argument as a right to life, because they think that social morality must be advocated by the state, and that is vital to maintaining the liberty and equality that we have in a particular society. So conservatives are about preserving social institutions to guarantee the Enlightenment understanding of individual liberty and equality, which is sovereignty of the individual, something that we don't believe in as Muslims. We believe that God is sovereign over us. We're the property of the Creator. We're not our own property, which would be kind of ridiculous. We are an amana, we are a trust. So that's where we are. That's one of the many things that we differ over conservatism. So conservatives only see culture or tradition in a society as something, as part of a social institution, which was developed over centuries and helps preserve stability in that society. That's all they see it as. That's their argument, right? They want to preserve. Some conservatives actually are for change, but they want it at a slow pace. Like they don't want some over-enthusiastic liberal to use their principles of social justice or equality or what have you to radically change society overnight, because that will cause chaos. Humans don't work like that, they say. It must be through gradual increments. So they're almost slowing down the pace of liberalization, but they don't want to make it stop or halt it. They just want it to be at a slow pace. Most conservatives are like that. The current joke now amongst conservatives, obviously the joke that's always been said of conservatives, is that a conservative is defending what a liberal was advocating 40 years ago, right? So a conservative is basically what a liberal was 40, 30 years ago. So they just want to slow down the brakes of that change. Then you have on the extreme left. Here it's on the right hand side, but imagine it being on the left. This is kind of socialism. Now, by the way, right wing, left wing comes from the French Revolution. The kind of the French equivalent of their parliament. Those who who wanted to get rid of the king and make a completely equal society with no private property, what have you, or a redistribution of wealth, they were sitting on the left wing, and those who wanted the restoration of the monarchy were sitting on the right wing. Wanted to preserve the monarchy and restore all the monarchy's rights were on the right wing, and then those who were like somewhere in between were in the middle ground, and that's where you get right wing and left wing from. So it was there to kind of measure how far or how fast you want to progress along the Enlightenment values towards individual liberty and equality, and that's the scale used. And liberalism is obviously somewhere in between. It believed in individual liberty and in equality, but it differs from conservatives because liberalism believes not that you don't have to necessarily preserve any social institutions. They might be useful, but you can change them, and you can change social institutions to make the society more liberal, more just, according to liberalism's understanding of justice, and equal in ways like, for example, equal opportunity. So before, conservatives believe in equality under the law. Liberals, or now social liberals, believe in equal opportunity, but not equality in wealth, because now that's more veering towards the socialist side. That's an equality they won't go for. But the socialists will say, look, we believe in individual freedom too. We believe that an individual can only be truly free if society gives everyone common ownership of the means of production. And social democracy is like a halfway house between socialism and Marxism and kind of liberalism, a more kind of gradualist approach to changing liberalism into socialism, but very gradually, or maybe a hybrid structure, depending on what type of social democracy. It's a hybrid of liberalism and socialism. And of course, you then have, it's hard to kind of categorize the post-Marxists or postmodern existentialists, sometimes neo-Marxists. They were basically Marxists or who wondered why society wasn't changing towards their grand utopia of a Marxist revolution, why the Western societies, the heavily industrialized ones, were not the ones who were going to fall to revolution, as Karl Marx's equations, so to speak, predicted would happen. And so they concluded that the thing that is keeping the masses from revolution is that they've been culturally controlled by cultural hegemony of the elite. Elite defined by in this particular one case, the first case was by the bourgeois, the owners of the means of production, the rich class, basically. And if only they were controlling people via entertainment, via cultural products, via mass media, via what have you. And so the only way to kind of create the circumstances for a revolution is you have to get rid of that culture, they call it ideology, something that gives it's a false consciousness. It controls the masses. It makes them think they're living in a delusion of freedom and justice when they're not actually living in freedom and justice. So they kind of developed a kind of cultural means, not an actual militant means of revolution, but a cultural means of revolution by destroying and attacking the cultural hegemony of these upper classes. And of course, it then split off into different avenues depending on which characteristic you want to look at. The socialist wants to look at. So you want to look at class, wealth. Then you have the bourgeois and the working class. But you can look at not just the privilege of class, but now the privilege of other characteristics like skin color in America, of course, because skin color was something that was part of the law system there to discriminate between citizens, and of course the era of slavery before that. So there's the white supremacy, and then you have everyone else underneath that in different ranks depending on how their proximity to whiteness. You have, and then of course men versus women. So and then you have non-disabled versus disabled, the heteronormativity versus kind of gay, homosexual, lesbian, and so on and so forth. So they kind of split into this binary in a way of this kind of fight between two dominant classes, but for each of the different aspects that they saw there was a lack of absolute identical equality in all things. And so that's kind of social justice activists, or sometimes pejorative called social justice warriors. You notice that I've put fascism underneath liberalism. Fascism is a little flip side to liberalism. Most people don't realize. Fascism is really is the argument that the state is more important than the individual, which the liberal doesn't believe in. But the fascist has a good counter argument. Good only in that the liberal can't rebut it, but as far as from the Islamic perspective, fascism, liberalism, conservatism, Marxism, socialism, and social democracy, and post-Marxism are all irrational and all based on assumptions, speculations, and they don't really fit human nature. But fascist argument, the argument that liberals can't argue against, unfortunately, for the liberals, is that the state is more important than the individual because the state is the only one that guarantees your rights. And so that's why fascists will argue that it's more important than liberalism. Sorry, is there a...
Do you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so you hear me now, okay. Okay, so I just wanted to give you a heads up, inshallah, like in a few minutes, like 5 minutes, we're gonna have questions coming in soon. So just wanted to give you a quick update on that.
Okay, khair, inshallah. That's fine. Okay.
I'm about to mute myself as well.
Okay. So basically, as I've demonstrated, that fascism is really a flip side to liberalism. When people realize that, when there's no God, when they take out God out of the equation and they realize there's no God from their Enlightenment perspective, whereas we as Muslims know that there is a God. But when they say, oh, you know what, our society isn't based on God's values, so therefore, maybe there's no God, which is why many liberals and why the West is eventually going towards atheism. They say then, well, what is the basis of our rights? Nature doesn't care about our rights. What does care about our rights? And well, what will protect our rights? Well, then someone will say, well, the state is the only one that actually gives your rights meaning. And then the state is more important than your rights. Because without the state, no one's going to care about your rights. So that's where fascists come into it. So this fascist believes in strength. Strength and unity is the guarantee of the rights of the citizen. Of course, which citizen? But that's that's a question that will obviously lead to what you call kind of racist or ethno-nationalism. So all the liberal thinkers were intolerant. They were intolerant of religions that were political. So any religion, including being a Muslim, although also a Catholic, they said that they don't really have a right to toleration because they are political. Jacques Rousseau believed that any religion that believed other religions were wrong, that people were going to go to hell if they don't follow their religion, they were intolerant and shouldn't be tolerated, those religions as well. So this kind of shows that the Enlightenment thinkers, they're intolerant. Right? Once they set their own Aqidah up, anyone who disagrees with this Aqidah, they view them as a danger, as an existential threat. So conservatism, as mentioned here, just for you guys to notice, David Hume argues that that freedom is dependent on the authority of society and of state. That's why many people think that conservatives are almost going to lead on to fascism, but conservatives have many different strands within them. Likewise, Edmund Burke argued that civil society is greater than individuals, and you must preserve the social institutions that guarantee the freedom of individuals. And that you should be cautious in making changes in politics. So this is why conservatives are cautious in making. They believe in making changes. That's why conservatives vote for changes. They vote for laws, but they try to be more cautious about making new laws. Of course, they're very enthusiastic about making laws that increase the power of the state. As long as the state, of course, as they would say, is elected, then you should trust them to do the right thing because they are elected by you. So if you don't like them, you can change the government in theory. Now, the Muslim confusion over labels to self-identify. These are the kind of ridiculous labels that Muslims have identified themselves at, and they're ridiculous because if you understand it, it's an oxymoron in terms of the liberal Muslim. Now, if you mean liberal in the Latin sense, from liberalis, to mean a generous Muslim who gives lots of sadaqah, well, fine. But to use the label liberal means you adopt a particular Western Enlightenment view, a political philosophy which is contradictory to Islam on its fundamental basis, and then the laws that it allows, it contradicts. Being a strict Muslim, well, considering that the word Muslim means someone who submits to God, Muslim means someone who submits to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you can only ever be someone who submits to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or someone who is imperfectly submitting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but you can't be a strict Muslim. This has a connotation that being a strict Muslim is an aberration, is not what was intended, it's not the norm. What about the norm as in it's not, it's something that is odd, shouldn't happen, or should happen very sparingly. Well, no, you can only be a Muslim. You can't, and you can only be a Muslim or a lax Muslim or a Jahil Muslim, a Muslim that doesn't know their own religion very well. A Jahil Muslim or an Asi Muslim, a Muslim who is negligent, or a Fasik Muslim, a Muslim who's a wrongdoer. You're breaking the laws. You're breaking the laws of your own belief system. But you can't be someone who's a strict Muslim, because being a strict Muslim is just being a Muslim. If by strict meaning you submit to God, then being a Muslim is really just a tautology. You can't be a Muslim. A conservative Muslim is equally just as ridiculous as a liberal Muslim. A conservative Muslim, as Muslims, we're not here to conserve. We're here to call people to the deen. We're here to worship Allah. We're here to submit to the Creator. Now, if you're going to say, well, but don't Muslims conserve certain values? Well, then why not call the liberals conservatives? Because liberals conserve the values of liberalism, right? They call creed, they conserve it, right? So it becomes ridiculous, right? We're not conservatives. Did the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, want to conserve all the values of the Quraysh? No, he changed them. So Islam was a force of change. It's not conserving. In essence, when you call yourself a conservative Muslim, you're basically saying that you're adopting the Western view of human progress towards their utopia, and that you're just either you believe in slowing down that progress a little bit to make it more bite-sized, or you believe that when going on to that progress, you should just conserve a few things as you march in lockstep towards the utopia that liberalism or the Enlightenment values call to, which obviously we don't believe in. So a conservative Muslim is, again, something ridiculous. We're not here to conserve. We might be here to change the world if it's not in conformance with with submission to the Creator of the universe. An Islamist Muslim, this is actually a pejorative term, is trying to say that any Muslim that believes that Islam is a complete way of life, that not just a purpose of life for humans, but a purpose of life that actually has something to say about life itself, life's affairs itself, a radical notion, well, not in human history, is somehow an aberration to say that anyone who believes that Islam actually has something to say about life's affairs itself, the affairs of human society and people, is now an aberration, whereas it was actually the norm of a Muslim. If you believe Islam is a comprehensive way of life, then why are you limiting it to only how you pray? Right? It has a bit more than how you pray. Even as the people of Saleh said to Saleh, does your salah tell you that we have to change, in essence, change our customs and beliefs and so on and so forth? It had more than just, the ramification is more than just the prayer. It's that the whole way of life actually has effects on how humans live generally. So this is a pejorative, although what most people don't know is the irony is that initially the West tried to, after they got rid of the word Mohammedan, they tried to label Muslims as Islamists. Only like you say, Islam as Islamism, like Judaism or Hinduism. So they were initially going to call it Islamism, but for reasons which I won't go into, they dropped the ism, and then they brought it back many decades later to as a pejorative to refer to Muslims who don't want to buy into Western colonialism and want to live as Muslims lived before colonialism, which is living it as a way of life. Feminist Muslim is equally just as ridiculous as the rest, because you adopt the idea of feminism in the West is that women and men have or should have identical roles, gender roles, or they should be free to pick their gender roles. Now, we believe as Muslims that sure, people can, they can choose to work, women can choose to work, men can choose to work, all those things, which are in Islam, there's latitude for. But what the feminist believes is that it is an offense to even to basically have a law system that has that recognizes the different gender roles, doesn't treat men and women identically, and gives some kind of difference to that. The socialist Muslim equally so, and the social justice activist Muslim yet again the same. Although they're even more than the feminists, because the feminists believe that the law should be identical, but the social justice activist believes that the cultural understanding of where men and women should be identical, as in that men and women there should be no even a gender category. And the Marxist Muslim, well, I don't need to kind of explain to you how ridiculous that is. And so I'm gonna just to finish up before the Q&A begins, if you don't mind. Some people say we're just trying to we can use these labels because we can reclaim these labels. These labels, we're just using them because what's the harm? What's the harm in using them? Well, they have connotations, right? You might as well make the argument for fascist Muslim and just say, oh no, it just means strength through unity. Any Muslim that believes in unity is a fascist Muslim, because that's what fascista means in Latin, strength, and but in essence, strength through the unity. Muslim polytheists, you could just say it just means that belief in a God with many names. That's not a problem. Well, it is a problem because you can't change the word of a well-known. It has a well-known connotation that's ridiculous. You can't say polytheist means one God but with many names. That's not polytheism. Communist Muslim, it just means respecting community values. Again, that's ridiculous. A Muslim atheist, they could say it just means negating false anthropomorphic idols, but not negating the one transcendent God. And they might argue it like Socrates was. Maybe Socrates believed in one God, but he was called an atheist because he rejected the idols of Athens. You say, again, that's ridiculous because you might try to say that's how you define the meaning of it, but because it has this connotation, it's ridiculous to use it and cause confusion. We should be mubin, like the Quran is. We should be clear in expressing the truth. What about some calling themselves a Muslim idolater? They say, oh no, it just means that they honor Muslim heroes from the present, like, role models as idols, but not in the literal sense. Well, that's just ridiculous, of course. Or what about racist Muslims? They say we can call ourselves racist because it just means that they honor the race of Adam alayhi salam, or they recognize the differences in tribes and nations, right? They just recognize there are differences in tribes and nations. Again, that's ridiculous and absurd. Even if they try to argue, they're going to reclaim the meaning, or they're going to give it their own meaning because of the clear connotations. What about a Satanist Muslim? They could say, oh, it just means that they believe in a concept of the devil and God against his works. They just say a Satanist Muslim is someone who believes that Satan exists. So why can't you call themselves Satanist Muslims? You'll say, again, it's ridiculous because of the connotations. What about Trinitarian Muslim? It just means they believe in the three aspects or categories of defining God's attributes and the Tawheed al-Rububiyyah, Tawheed uluhiyyah, and his Asma wa Sifat, right? Three. That's how ridiculous it is when Muslims try to use these terms. Why they're using these terms? The reason why they'll adopt these labels is because they want identity and respect from the West. They use terms which have meaning in the West, meaning which is respect, which has value or valued by the West, and they've made the West their pivot for defining themselves. They revolve around the West. They circumambulate kind of the Western kind of thought and mindset. And so, what's the Quranic solution? Well, what does the Quran say about this? And who is better in speech than the one who invites to Allah and does righteousness and says, "Indeed, I am one of the Muslims." And this can only work if Muslims understand what it is to be a Muslim, the worldview of Islam, our belief about the purpose and origination of the cosmos, and the Islamic way of life in its full form, including political solutions for life's affairs, which means understanding what the Prophet Muhammad said about why he set up a city-state in the first place, what he was going to do with it, why we should live under an Islamic system, or why he set up an Islamic system, and why it was part of him being a mercy to mankind. Understand the difference between Islam and liberalism, like on economics. We actually have a lot of differences between ourselves and liberalism and economics. I have a lecture on economics on YouTube. You can look for that. And of course, we should understand that peace and contentment can only be in Islam and Islamic labels. We should find peace and contentment in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and in in the labels that Islam gives for us. And so the solution is that we have to present Islam as the only explanation of reality. We show that Islam is true because it's the only explanation of reality. We show that Islam must be advanced as the best solution for human nature in private, social, and public settings. So we use we show how the West has failed human nature and how Islam actually has hikmah and wisdom in dealing with it. It suits the fitrah because it comes from the same author as the fitrah. And for those of you who want further information on this, these points, please email info@the-Quran Institute, as well as there's courses I've done on the different schools of thought in Western civilization, as well as 2,500 years of Western philosophy. Do email that, and inshallah, you can get more information, more detailed information on all these topics, and how, as Muslims, we can advance Islam confidently and as a distinct way of life, distinct from the other ways of life that the West offer us. So, barakallahu feekum for listening, and inshallah, I will.
So, inshallah, I have some questions for you from the audience. One of them is, let me start from the top, inshallah. We only have time for a few of them. So, what is one way? Oh, my bad. So, how can Muslims overcome nationalism and patriotism?
Put simply, you can only overcome nationalism and patriotism if you understand what they are, which is the idea that if you belong to a particular ethnic group, you have a special kind of sovereignty to an area of land that you get to control and you get to rule. Whereas, as we know, it is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that owns the whole earth. And for Muslims, the only nation that we are now part of is a nation which you can choose to be a member of that nation. You don't have to be born into it, and it won't be so exclusive, which is the nation of Islam, nation of the Ummah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Not to be confused with the American nation of Islam, by the way. So as Muslims, we're all believers, we recognize that amongst ourselves. And there's anything else, any other grouping or separation, or any other idea of a right, any other idea of Izzah belonging to any other group, is Jahiliyyah, is condemned by the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu as Asabiyya. He even says that those who basically call for it, in one hadith is narrated that he said, they're not one of us, they're not one of us. So as long as Muslims understand that there's only one nation, and that is the Ummah, they're the nation. Once we understand that, everything else is meaningless and will be used against you in the Day of Judgment. So understand, so be part of the nation of believers.
Inshallah, unfortunately, we're out of time for the segment. So I apologize if I was unable to get to your question. Jazakallah khair, Ustad, for coming in. That was a very knowledgeable, and alhamdulillah, I learned a lot about it, and the audience as well. So Jazakallah khair, Ustad, for coming in and giving us, the knowledge that of the identity of where we should be. So Jazakallah khair.
Barakallahu feekum.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.